Hi, it's Heather, and I am with the Plot Genie. And today we are going to talk about how to write when you don't want to. I'm not talking about how to write if some outside force has intervened or your kids are being just so lovingly clingy or because you have a full-time job. I am specifically talking about when you have the time and the capacity to write, you're just not in the mood to write. Unfortunately, if we want to make money from our writing, we have to look at this as a job. We can't go into our 9 to 5 and be like, you know what, I really don't want to work. I mean, I guess technically you could. You could take your day off, and sometimes you'll get paid and sometimes you won't. But unfortunately, this for us as entrepreneurs, where no one is literally telling us what we have to do, this can turn into a bad habit that's really, really hard to break away from. So I wanted to just give you guys some tips on how to break free from not wanting to write, because I think we've all been there, and if we fall into that trap, it's going to be so much harder to start back writing again. So first, I just want to say writing is a habit. A lot of people think that writing is this inspiration or creative force that only blesses certain people, and we have to wait to be blessed with inspiration. And that's not true at all. Creativity is a habit that anyone can form as long as they are consistent with it. I spoke about this in a couple of other videos, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but essentially, you can train your brain to be creative, even if you're not necessarily feeling all that creative. And in order to do that, what you would need to do is build a habit. Be consistent. And I think that that's the part that everybody has such a hard time on, is consistency. So that's why I try to do these videos, to help your consistency, and not only that, but to have you make choices that feel good and that are easy for you. So for this particular video, I just wanted to give you some tips on when you are being tempted to not write by that little devil on your shoulder, how you can break free from that. So let's just jump right in. Number one of the things I really like to do, and I didn't always like to do it, but I've built this habit of doing, is journaling. Sometimes my thoughts jump from, what am I going to have for dinner? What kid has hockey practice? Do I need to send out a newsletter? Jumps from thing to thing to thing. Journaling, writing stuff down physically with a pen and a piece of paper, helps me focus my thoughts into sort of one thing. And so for me, I like to journal. And some of the questions that I ask myself if I am sitting at my computer and I'm just like, I don't want to write, is, what are you blocking? What is coming up for me where I specifically don't want to write? Is it the series itself? Am I bored with what's going on? Is this just not speaking to me anymore? Or is it something deeper? And then I'll ask myself, okay, well, what are you afraid of? So my book, or my spin-off series to the Vampire Pirate Saga, is the Pirate Hunter Saga. And I wrote the first book like 2 years ago, and I wrote the second book like last year, and despite having 2 books ready to go, they just kind of sat there, and I don't even know why. And it was, I kind of journaled, and I tried to figure this out, because I'm like, I know I have these built-in readers that loved the series. I have amazing covers by Rebecca Frank, and I am in a place in my writing where I have grown so much from that first series that I know what worked with it and what I like to implement and what I wouldn't like to do. So what am I afraid of? And it's because I put so much of who I am and why writing itself is just so important to me into the series and into these characters that I almost wanted to keep them for myself. And once I had journaled that and I realized, oh, oh, that's selfish. What if somebody else needs these characters in the same way that I did? What if somebody else needs to be inspired the same way I was inspired by X, Y, and Z? And once I figured that out, I was like, oh, okay, it's safe for me to release these books. It's safe for me to write them. Because it's kind of like, on top of that, you have that fear of this idea is so precious to you that you almost feel like, I can't do that. I'm the wrong person for the job, even though it's your idea. It's like having this newborn baby and them looking at you with all of the reverence of, you're going to be the one taking care of me. You are the one raising me into becoming who I am meant to be. And it's almost like you're like, no, I can't do that. Like, I am not that person. I still like eat ice cream for dinner or whatever. Like, I can't be this person who raises a child, but ultimately we are. We're called to write stories for a reason. We're called to have these ideas for a reason. We're called to be inspired by what we're inspired for a reason. And I feel like that is our service to the world, is following through when we get called to write certain things. So the last thing I like to ask myself after I journal is, can I clear these? Whether I'm tapping, I do EFT, whether it's through meditation, or whether it's just like, okay, I'm going to release these blocks. I'm just going to ask it just to, be gone. And sometimes it's not that I can't just do it, like it has to happen over time. And that is totally fine. But journaling is one of the things that really, really has helped me focus and figure out, okay, well, what's going on with me? Why don't I want to write today? And I need to know that because writing is my job. And if I do not do my job, I don't get paid, or my fans lose faith in me because I am not producing what I have already promised them. And that is something that motivates me to take responsibility for my feelings, not necessarily ignoring my feelings, but just kind of taking responsibility and trying to figure it out so I can clear what that obstacle is, and just give myself the time before jumping back in and writing. Number 2, write something else. Take a day, write something else for fun. Maybe it's a new idea you've been kicking around. Maybe it's a scene from your story, but it's like jumping ahead. Write something in order to remind yourself that, guess what, you can still write. You are still capable of it. You are still good at it. It's just something is blocking you right now from writing this particular scene that you are working on, or this particular book if you haven't already started on it. Just write something else. Give yourself permission to write whatever you want without that little voice in your head is, well, you're not going to publish it, so what's the point of wasting time, or whatever. Give yourself permission to write something else, something that you truly love, something that you truly want to write. And just remind yourself, hey, this is fun. Hey, I enjoy this. Hey, I can do this, Number 3, sometimes you have to kind of force it. And I know that that's not exactly what people want to hear, right? We're creative, the words are supposed to flow, but guess what? Sometimes they don't. Right now, I am working on a chapter, and it's one of those chapters that needs to happen. And when I am writing it and it comes. But if I take that break and I get out of it, it's a little bit harder for me to get back into it. So you could stick with it if that's what it is, but I need those breaks just for my sanity, or else I'm going to start feeling like this particular chapter is just too much for me and I'm not going to enjoy it, and I don't want my fans to not enjoy it either. So I take my breaks and I force myself to go back into it. It's kind of like I have a 5-year-old who's in preschool, and there are mornings where she is absolutely wonderful and she's so excited for school and it's so fun. And there are other mornings where she wants nothing to do with school. She just wants to stay home. She just wants to be with mom or her sister, and she doesn't want to worry about it. Well, guess what? You kind of have to force her to get dressed. You have to drive her to the school, and the teacher will come take her from the car. And once she is at school, guess what? She completely forgets that she didn't want to not go. Sometimes it's the same for your writing. You have to sit down and you have to force out the sentences. If you are still there after 15, 20 minutes and you are still forcing out the sentences, maybe at that point you kind of need to take a break, give yourself the day off, refresh yourself, and then go back in, making a commitment that you will get X amount of words, even if they're forced. And once you start going, it's like, there's this hockey player, Teemu Selanne, who played for the Anaheim Ducks. He calls it like the catch-up effect. You have a player who will not produce a goal, who will not score. All he needs is that one goal, and then it's like banging on the catch-up. Like once that goal gets out, it's so easy to start scoring again. And I kind of apply that to writing too. Sometimes you just need to get in that X amount of words, and they'll start flowing again. So see what happens. And if you need a break, take a break. So number 4, ask yourself, have you prepared for this particular scene, for this particular book? Sometimes we get blocked because we have no idea what we're going to write. And we use that as an excuse of, well, I'm not inspired. No, it's not because you're not inspired. It's because you have no idea what you're writing. And guess what? That is your job. So I have a video on this. It's how to create books from scratch, like ideas from scratch, and I will link it below. But figure out what you want to write. If this is a first book in a new series, take a couple of days to start planning things. And I'm not saying that you have to go into depth with a huge outline, but figure out who your characters are. For me, I like to cast my characters and then I get a sense of who they are, right? So like for my Keepers of the Crypt saga, the serial, I had already cast Michael Keaton as my, literally Keaton. I'm so on the nose. It's just who I am. Anyway, and so when I write, his name is such an anchor to who his character is that even though it's not Beetlejuice, it's not Michael Keaton, it's a completely different character who, we won't get into it, that's not the point. But it helps me focus on who they are. And if I know my character well enough, I know I can be like, okay, here's the situation that has to happen in order to get to Y, right? But I know Keaton well enough to know how he's going to react. And you know what? I'm going to throw some obstacles his way, maybe get him a little jealous, whatever. And I can do that. And that will get the ball rolling for me. So make sure that you're prepared, whether that's an outline, whether that's knowing your characters well enough to know how they're going to handle certain situations, whether it's a combination of the two. But don't use this as an excuse to start procrastinating. People jump into their story Bibles or their character sheets or their outlines as a way to not write. And I don't think that is going to be conducive to your writing, because at the end of the day, we're not publishing character sheets. We're not publishing, outlines. We're publishing books, which means we have to write the books. So make sure that you're prepared. Okay. And the last thing that the last piece of advice I wanted to give you for this is, depending on where you are, if this is like book 7 in a series, go back and read reviews of books 1 and books 2 or whatever. Remind yourself that your readers are so excited for these books. Do not read the 3s and down. We're not looking at that right now. Just remind yourself why readers love what you're writing and why they need this next book. If this is a new series, go back in your story and read the last chapter. Remind yourself that you're a good writer, that you were meant to tell the story for a reason. And if you're completely at a loss, like it's a blank page completely, go back to your why of why are you writing in the first place? And why did this story catch your eye? Like, why did you choose to write this one when I'm sure you have 5 or 6 more kicking around in your head? Is it because you think that this is the one that's going to make the most money? Or is this the one that's bringing you joy and you're so worried that people are going to hate it or whatever? Either way, figure it out. Give yourself permission to write it. If you can't, I give you permission to write it. Don't worry about the financial gain. Worry about how you feel when you're writing it. Like I said, we all have ideas for a reason. And I truly believe that the universe has given these ideas because they need our voice to tell these stories. Our characters are whispering their dialogue, what's going to happen, because they trust us with this. And don't take that for granted. We all have days where we don't want to write. We're tired, we're busy, we're just not in that space yet. But just realize that you can bring yourself out of that. You have the tools, you have the capabilities, and you are meant to tell your story. Don't forget that. So, thanks for being here. I would love to hear what you do when you don't want to write. Do you take a break? Do you jump into a different story? What do you like to do? Please leave me a comment below. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. I do videos like this every Tuesday and Thursday to help other writers bring joy and ease into their writing life. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you soon. Have a good one.